And the court can impose a sentence that does take into account acquitted conduct. So he wasn't convicted of beating Cassie, but the court can take that into consideration when he fashions a remedy in this case, and he looks at the whole person. So the prosecution's asking for 135. The defense is asking for 14. You want my prediction? I'm not going to give it to you.
Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. And what he do? And he's going to react to all the self-snitching.
Hi, this is Bruce Rivers. Welcome to another fun-filled episode of Criminal Lawyer Reacts. I'm Bruce Rivers, your very own tongue-tied, board-certified criminal defense lawyer. Today we are reacting to the Diddy sentencing. It's tomorrow, so I'm going to make a prediction. My prediction, your addiction is your affliction. Before we get to this prediction, and I'm going to go through the guidelines with you here, this episode is brought to you by askalawyer.com. If you're sitting in a metropolitan jail cell in New York City and you think, God, I should have called askalawyer.com before I decided to have people lathered up in all kinds of baby oil, well, you would have done yourself a service. For $49, you could have gotten advice. Don't do that, Mr. Diddy. So you should have gotten a hold of askalawyer.com. Askalawyer.com is an effective way to either help you with a case if you're doing your own legal research, or get you on the way to help you figure out what you should be doing. If you're somebody suing you, or you want to sue somebody else, they'll get you where you need to go. You get a living, breathing lawyer for $49. You can't beat that. That's a really good deal. Plus, if you're doing your own legal research, they've got an AI component that's trained in all of 50 states. So for $49, you can get to where you need to go. askalawyer.com. Okay, so I believe Mr. Diddy was charged with or convicted of 2 counts of the Mann Act. The Mann Act is transporting someone across state lines for sexual purposes, commercial sexual purposes, in other words, prostitution. Now, normally, this is not that big a deal, because if you look at the guidelines, if it involves sex trafficking, it's a level 34. We're going to show you the grid here in a second. But if it's not sex trafficking, it's a level 14. So you start out with 0 criminal. Let's say Mr. Wonderful has 0 criminal history, which I assume he probably does. So that means you're on the 1. So you have criminal history category 1, so 0 or 1, and you go to 14 on the side, the offense severity level. That's 15 to 21 months. Now, you go through the specific offense characteristics, and there's different. If the offense involved more than one victim, Chapter 3 would apply. If subsection A2 applies, then the offense involved fraud or coercion increased by 4 levels. So if the judge believes that, whether it was Cassie or somebody else, was subject to some form of coercion, and there's evidence that they were, then you increase it by 4 levels. And if you increase by 4 levels, that brings you up to 18. So that gives you 27 to 33 months. Doesn't seem like a long sentence, does it? Well, just recently, Diddy's lawyers filed a last-ditch effort to throw out the case or have a new trial. This is what's happened here. The Judge Arun Subramanian rejected Diddy Combs' request for a new trial and the rapper's demand for an acquittal days before his scheduled sentencing. Subramanian said that the prosecution provided overwhelming evidence of Diddy's guilt on the charges of transportation to engage in prostitution. The one thing that always confused me is, why didn't they charge him with a drug conspiracy? I mean, there's ample evidence of drug use throughout the whole thing. It wouldn't take that much to convict him of a drug conspiracy, and the guidelines would be much higher, and there'd be mandatory minimums. There's no mandatory minimum here. That by itself might be enough to dispose of Combs' challenge, but the other factors don't do much to help Combs either. The rapper's legal team argued that the sex trafficking and racketeering evidence could have prejudiced the jury. Judge Subramanian also rejected the spillover prejudice argument, pointing to this split verdict. I mean, here's the thing. It was no question in anybody's mind that he hired hookers to come in, male or otherwise. Who wants to watch somebody screw their partner, honestly? I mean, sex is supposed to be loving. It's supposed to be caring. It's supposed to be, oh my God, that was just so wonderful. Come here and hold me, baby. I mean, that's the way, not this, display of somebody banging your partner. Ugh. God, I just want to take your brain out and scrub it, don't you? After hearing all this stuff. It weighs heavily that the jury declined to convict him on any of the counts related to that conduct, Subramanian wrote. Had the prejudice indeed been so great, one would expect the jury to convict on the most relevant counts before it could spill over to infect the others. In other words, it didn't affect the other counts. A jury convicted Diddy on 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution on July 2nd. That I'll Be Missing You rapper was acquitted of the most serious charges, the sex trafficking and the racketeering charges. Diddy could spend a maximum of 20 years behind bars. That'll never happen. 10 years for each count. That's the statutory maximum. That won't happen. The prosecutor recommended 135 months for his sentencing. 135 months. Now, I'm not entirely sure. I don't have all the sentencing factors, but you could double this up. So if we have 18, 27, or 33 months, and you double it up for a second count, that means the guidelines could be as high as 75 months. He's already spent a year in, right? This is the other thing that the prosecution said. Incredibly, while the defendant conceded his acts of violence and abuse throughout the trial, he now argues that the victims should shoulder the blame. So in other words, I haven't seen what the defense has filed for their... So here's what happens. You get convicted of it, whether you plead or you have a trial and convicted, you have what's called a pre-sentence report that's created by probation. So they meet with you, and in all likelihood, they didn't talk with Diddy about the facts, but they go through his background. They go through his family, his finances. They go through his criminal history and his social history and medical and mental history, okay? They go through all this stuff. Then they also go through the facts of the case, and they create a report for the judge. And then what the judge does is, well, first of all, they send that to the parties first, and then the parties look at it and say, can we object to this, or this? And they're going to object to all the inclusion of anything that was acquitted. However, the judge can take into consideration acquitted conduct. So just so you know, that is something that the judge can take into consideration. That's why this is not your typical Mann Act kind of case. There's so much conduct here. So, I mean, even if you don't believe it was sex trafficking or if it wasn't racketeering, there's still so much conduct there, right? And if the judge believes that there's any kind of coercion at all, then they can add that 4-point enhancement. And if you multiply that by 2 because there's a second count, now you're looking at a significant prison sentence. The prosecution's asking for 135 months. The defense is asking for acquittal of all the charges and a new trial at the very least. And then they're asking for him to be released. Let's see, what does the defense say? Diddy's team proposed a 14-month sentence ahead of the October 3rd hearing for federal charges of transportation, in a sense, time served. He's already spent 13 months behind bars. Combs' lawyers claim the musician had been sufficiently punished for his crimes. I'm going to give you my prediction here. Combs has suffered physically and mentally, and continued incarceration serves no positive goal. Courts do not simply punish, but must restore and rehabilitate with the goal to returning the convicted person to their community as soon as practicable. The sentencing memorandum obtained by Fox News Digital stated, upon release, Mr. Combs fully intends to abide by every order of this court, to renew and repair relationships that have been damaged in a healthy, positive, and lawful manner without baby oil. Or it doesn't say the baby oil comment. After embarking on his journey, Mr. Combs will devote attention to his family and community and to creating new initiatives and opportunities for others. And then they've got a picture of him here in a fucking towel in the hallway. Oh, f***ing. So what happens next? So the defense and the government, they get the pre-sentence report. They file objections, like, for example, on the inclusion of other crimes or other victims, if they're more than one victim, they can object to that enhancement. You've got one side asking for 130, and then what happens after you get those objections filed, then you get the final report, and then each side files their sentencing memorandum. And it basically gives you their position. And now we have the defense asking for 14 months, essentially time served, and that the state or the government is asking for 135 months. Big gap there, right? So the other thing that happens is you get all these letters of support. There was a pastor that, wrote a letter. I'm not going to read you the letter, but he wrote a letter. And then you got Gina's last word. So I felt pressure to feel like a victim. I told them I was not, but they insisted I was. I understand they concluded that I had been sex trafficked and involved in forced prostitution. I did not agree. Some of that might sway the day, but here's the other thing. It's important behavior no matter what. And Cassie Ventura, she'll submit a victim impact. I still have nightmares and flashbacks on a regular, everyday basis, and continue to require psychological care to cope with my past. My worries that Sean Combs or his associates will come after me and my family is a reality. I have, in fact, moved from my family out of the New York area, and I'm keeping him private and quiet as I possibly can because I am so scared that if he walks free, his first actions will be to swift retribution towards me and others who spoke up about his abuse at trial. Cassie, I'm sure, will give that letter to the court, and the court's going to take that into consideration. The court sees his abuse. So the court's not confined to just the simple act of hiring a prostitute, and the court can look at the whole picture and say, this is what I think needs to happen. Now, the guidelines are not mandatory. They're advisory. So the judge, as long as he's reasonable and there's a logical conclusion flowing from his decision, there's a lot of latitude that the court can, have when imposing a sentence. And the court can impose a sentence that does take into account acquitted conduct. So he wasn't convicted of beating Cassie, but the court can take that into consideration when he fashions a remedy in this case, and he looks at the whole person. So the prosecution's asking for 135. The defense is asking for 14. You want my prediction? I'm not going to give it to you. No, I'm just joking. It's hard to say, because a guideline sentence could be somewhere in the 56 to 63 months. And I think that's where the sentence is going to come down. Somewhere in the 56 to 63 months. If he whacks him on the high end of things, this was clearly just absolutely egregious conduct, no matter how you slice it. Even if it wasn't. See, the thing about it is it didn't have to be sex trafficking or racketeering for it to be a bad case. If you look at just the hiring and making her do this, and I know there was testimony and text messages from her saying, I'm looking forward to the freak off. But she explained that. She explained that she felt trapped and forced to say what she needed to say in order to get on. So I think you're going to see somewhere 56 to 63 months, somewhere in there, maybe even upwards of 70 months. But I think that's about where this case is going to fall. We'll see, because it's tomorrow. And hopefully Robert and our team will put this up tonight. So that's my prediction. Somewhere between 56 and 63 months, somewhere around there, maybe even upwards of 70 months. And now, if he whacks him harder than that, one could argue it might be unreasonable. But if the judge just gives him a guideline sentence at the top of the guidelines, it's pretty much unappealable. Certainly the whole conviction is appealable, and the sentence will be, appealable, and they'll appeal this. But the judge will be protected if he's sentenced on the high end of the range. So, but regardless of what sentence he gets, if he's in custody, he gets the credit for every day that he's in custody. And so I think it's right around 13 months or something like that, a little over a year. We'll see. We'll see you next time here at Criminal Lawyer Reacts. Make sure you subscribe, follow us on Instagram, follow us on Twitter, sign up for Patreon. Help Nick out of his box. Go to CLRBruceRivers.com for all the merch, and go to Facebook, and we'll see you next time here on Criminal Lawyer Reacts.
Broke down your case. He know all the charges that you about to face. You ain't coming home till 2058. That self-snitching gon' get you put away. Bruce Bruce Rivers just broke down your case. He know all the charges that you about to face. You ain't coming home till 2058. That self-snitching gon' get you put away.
23-hour lockdown, police is at my